Imagine a major Hollywood studio, like, dropping a press release tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And they're announcing a sprawling, big-budget biopic about the civil rights icon Rosa Parks.
Oh, wow. All right.
But there's a catch.
There always is.
Yeah, they've cast Sydney Sweeney in the lead role.
Oh, my gosh. The internet would literally melt down. I mean, it would be a catastrophic PR event.
A total meltdown. Right. The entire news cycle would just be dominated by cries of, cultural erasure, historical vandalism, and outright racism.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And honestly, nobody would be confused as to why people were upset. I mean, it's obvious.
Right. It makes complete sense.
But, what happens when that exact dynamic is reversed? Like, when historically or visually white characters, whether they're fictional or historical, are reimagined with non-white actors.
Well, that is where things get complicated.
Exactly. Suddenly, the rules of the conversation just completely flip.
Yeah, the reaction becomes this wildly complex mix of celebration, intense backlash, and this is key, a very specific type of media science.
So today, we are unpacking a cultural flashpoint that has just completely fractured modern fandom.
It really has.
And we're looking at a stack of sources that dive right into the mechanics of this battleground. We've got arguments from cultural commentators like John Delaros, and he also references Matt Walsh.
Right, both very prominent voices in this specific debate.
Yeah, and they claim Hollywood is engaged in an intentional campaign to erase white culture.
Which is a heavy accusation.
Very heavy. And we're pairing that with a short excerpt from an essay titled The Cultural Erasure of Racial Performance.
And that essay argues that this exact same trend is actually deeply patronizing and racist toward Black audiences.
Right. So it's a fascinating collision of perspectives, honestly.
It really is. I mean, you have two entirely different starting points arriving at a nearly identical critique of the Hollywood machine.
Yeah. And just to be clear with you, the listener, our job today isn't to pick a winner between these factions.
No, not at all.
We are not here to endorse a political viewpoint or take sides. These sources are highly charged, obviously.
Very charged.
And we're basically putting them under a microscope to figure out exactly how the battle lines of modern pop culture are being drawn, impartially reporting on what they're saying.
Right. We want you to fully understand the contours of this debate.
Yeah.
What is the psychology driving the outrage?
Exactly. How do the studios justify their decision?
It really forces us to ask what we actually value in the media we consume. Is it the core essence of a story or the specific aesthetic packaging we grew up with?
Yeah, it makes me think of that classic philosophical puzzle, the ship of Theseus.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right, like if you replace every single wooden plank on a ship over time, one by one.
Is it still the same ship?
Exactly. At what point does a reimagined character stop being the character you remember?
That is the million-dollar question.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because every online firestorm has a spark. And for the commentators we're analyzing today, that spark is a recent casting announcement surrounding a character who has been sailing the cultural seas for nearly a century.
We're talking about Betty Boop.
Right. Let's look at the press release that started this specific wave. So Quinta Brunson, who, by the way, is undeniably a massive talent, incredibly successful right now.
Oh, yeah, she's amazing.
She is slated to star as Betty Boop in a new feature film.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the project is being developed through her own production banner, Fifth Chance Productions.
Right.
And they're doing this in collaboration with Fleischer Studio.
Okay, so they have the official studio on board.
They do. Yep. And the narrative framing is actually quite ambitious, according to the sources. It's set up to trace the origin and evolution of the character, but through the perspective of her original creator, Max Fleischer.
Which is, a cool concept on paper, a biopic structure for a fictional character.
It's unique, for sure.
But the historical context of Betty Boop is what makes this a powder. If we look at the legacy outlined in she isn't just some random cartoon.
No, not at all.
She was created in 1930. She was in over 100 cartoons during that original run.
She is essentially an anchor of early American animation.
Yeah.
She evolved from this bizarre early animation hybrid-like, a sort of poodle-like nightclub singer.
Right. The early designs were weird.
Super weird. What? But then she evolved into a fully human, globally recognized jazz-age flapper icon. And the text points out a really great detail here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she was actually the first animated character ever profiled on A&E's biography series.
Wow. Okay, that tells you everything you need to know about her cultural weight.
Exactly. She's treated as a historical figure in her own right.
Which brings us to the core tension, because John Delaros looks at this announcement and zeroes in on one undeniable fact.
And what's that?
That Betty Boop has a highly specific, historically entrenched visual identity.
Right. Pale skin, striking red lips, the flapper dress.
And crucially, as Del Ares states, she has always been white. That visual is completely inseparable from her nearly 100-year legacy.
Yeah, and Quinta Brunson is a black woman.
Right. Now, here is where Del Ares' critique gets really interesting, I think.
Okay.
Because he isn't just mad about the casting itself.
He's not.
No, I mean, he is, but he's furious about how the trade press handled the announcement. Specifically, Variety.
What's fascinating here is how the source views the media ecosystem.
Yeah, break that down.
Well, Del Ares highlights that Variety published this exclusive announcement and treated it as a totally uncomplicated celebration.
Okay, that's the part that fascinates me.
Right.
Let me try to put this in perspective for you. Imagine if Coca-Cola decided tomorrow to change their iconic red and white.
Okay, classic brand.
Right. And from now on, Coke comes in a neon green and purple.
Whoa.
The recipe is exactly the same, but the visual is entirely. Now imagine the Wall Street Journal writes a massive front page feature on the brilliant new era of Coca-Cola.
And they don't mention the colors.
They literally never mention the color change. They just talk about how refreshing it is, acting as if the can has always been green and purple.
That would create a profound cognitive dissonance.
Right. If I've looked at a red can for 40 years and the newspaper is telling me the green can is an uncomplicated continuation of the red can, I'm going to feel like I'm losing my mind.
Yeah, it's very disorienting.
So why do the trade publications and the studios frame these announcements this way? Why ignore the massive visual elephant in the room?
Because in the view of the commentators we're studying, that omission is entirely deliberate.
Deliberate how?
They see it as a mechanism of control. Del Ares argues that by treating a massive visual departure as totally normal, the press is essentially gaslighting this segment of the audience that expects historical or visual fidelity.
Yes. So by pretending the change didn't happen.
By setting the terms of the engagement before the public can even react. Think about the psychology of it. If Variety acknowledges the change light, if they write, in a bold departure from her historical white depiction, Brunson will play boop.
Yeah.
They are implicitly validating the idea that it is a departure. They are acknowledging that a boundary has been crossed.
And by acknowledging the boundary, they kind of give the audience permission to debate whether crossing it was a good idea in the first place.
Exactly. But if they frame it as just an uncomplicated celebration, they construct a reality where no boundary was crossed at all.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, anyone who points out that Betty Boop looks completely different is automatically positioned as the aggressor.
That is wild.
Yeah, you aren't critiquing an artistic change at that point. You are disrupting a celebration.
Wow. So the silence on the visual change is weaponized.
Yes.
It instantly pathologizes any nostalgia the audience might have for the original look.
That is the core of Del Ares' frustration with the media apparatus. He sees the trade press as complicit in pushing an agenda by marginalizing legacy fans.
Okay, so if the studio is making this shift and the press is running cover for it, we have to ask ultimate question. Why? What is the motivation driving this? And this is where our stack of sources gets incredibly layered.
It really does.
Because we have two very different answers that both result in a heavy critique of Hollywood.
Yeah, let's start with Del Ares' thesis because it is sweeping and it is severe. He doesn't believe for a second that this is about a studio auditioning a bunch of actors and simply picking the most talented person for the job.
Right. He dismisses the meritocracy argument entirely.
Completely. He views this as an intentional, coordinated agenda, and his rhetoric is very strong.
Yeah, the sources get pretty intense.
He claims the ultimate goal of this trend is the intentional erasure of white culture.
He actually uses the word evil in his video transcript, right?
He does. He calls it programming being done to society to incite hatred and basically replace white people across.
It's a very systemic view of the entertainment industry, like painting it as an almost hostile, occupying force against its own historical demographic.
He sees it as a systematic dismantling of cultural touchstones.
Right.
But then we flip to our other source, the essay excerpt titled The Cultural Erasure of Racial Performance.
Yeah.
And we find an equally harsh critique of the studios, but from a completely inverted philosophical angle.
This is where I really had to sit back and process the material.
That's a lot to take in.
Because Del Ares says this casting trend is an aggressive attack on white culture. But the essay argues that race-swapping a historically white character is actually deeply patronizing and racist toward black people.
Exactly. The author of the essay is looking at the exact same studio behavior and drawing a different but parallel conclusion about the underlying cynicism.
So unpack that for me. How does the essay arrive?
The argument is that by taking a white character and simply pasting a black actor over that established iconography. The studios are implying that black culture is inherently unbankable on its own.
The essay uses some brutal language.
It really does.
It says, the people making these decisions think black culture is so uninteresting and maybe even terrible that they need white culture to compensate for the fact that black culture.
It's the idea of cultural equity as a battery.
Oh, I explain the battery.
So think of a legacy character like Betty Boop as a massive, fully charged battery of public goodwill and brand recognition.
Built up over 90.
Right. Now, a studio could build a brand new machine, new original story, rooted in authentic black culture, and charge it up themselves through great writing and marketing.
But that takes time.
And it involves huge financial risk.
Right.
So instead, the essay argues the studio just unplugs the Betty Boop battery and plugs it into their new project to jumpstart it.
Because they don't trust the new project to generate its own power.
Exactly. And the essay argues that this reveals a fundamental lack of faith in diverse storytelling. The studios are basically telling diverse audience, you don't get your own original myths and legends. You have to wear the hand-me-down clothes of older white characters to be palatable to a mainstream audience.
That is a fascinating horseshoe theory of media critique.
Isn't it?
You have the right-wing commentator angry that the battery is being stolen.
Right.
And you have the cultural essayist angry that they are being handed a used battery instead of getting their own.
Both sides of the spectrum look at the same corporate decision and see profound disrespect. They collectively argue that race swapping is just a lazy studio shortcut.
Yeah, instead of doing the hard work of elevating authentic, diverse stories, they just repurpose white iconography.
Which ends up alienating one demographic while simultaneously patronizing another.
Man, and this ties perfectly back to the hypothetical scenario Delara's uses to highlight what he sees as Hollywood's glaring hypocrisy.
The Rosa Parks example we started the show with.
Right. Casting Sydney Sweeney as Rosa Parks.
Yeah, Delrose brings that up to point out that the concept of cultural ownership only seems to apply in one direction.
How so?
Well, if a studio tried to put a white actor in a historically black role, the backlash wouldn't just be about historical inaccuracy.
Right, it wouldn't just be people saying, oh, the timeline is wrong.
No, it would be framed as a moral failing. It would be condemned immediately as racism and cultural appropriation.
And Delara's explicitly says that backlash would be justified. He says it would be very, very weird and wrong for a studio to do that. He acknowledges the boundary there.
But his argument is that the moment the dynamic is reversed, when a white character is played by a black actor, the moral outrage vanishes from the mainstream press.
The double standard.
Right. The very people who would be organizing boycotts over Sydney Sweeney's Rosa Parks are the ones writing variety articles celebrating Quinta Brunson's Betty Boop.
He is highlighting a massive double standard in how the media polices those cultural boundaries. Okay, so we have the critics accusing the studios of ideological manipulation on one side and lazy, patronizing tokenism on the other. But studios are corporations.
They are.
They exist to make a profit.
In theory, yes.
So how do the studios themselves justify, and how do our sources tear those justifications down?
Well, we have to look closely at the specific language the studios use to frame these projects.
Okay, what are they saying?
In the variety piece about Betty Boop, they make a very strategic comparison. They align Quinta Brunson's Betty Boop with Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie's Barbie.
Oh, wow. Which is a massive flex. I mean, Barbie made over $1 billion. It was a cultural juggernaut.
The framing is totally deliberate. They are calling it a formidable female creator, reimagining a nearly century-old female character through a contemporary lens.
They want the audience to see this as the exact same formula.
Exactly.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Barbie was incredibly subversive in its themes, but Margot Robbie looked exactly like the classic 1959 Barbie doll.
Yep.
The blonde hair, the outfits, the specific shade of pink. Isn't that the exact opposite of what they are studying?
That is precisely the flaw in the logic that Delara's attacks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he completely rejects the Barbie comparison for that exact reason. He argues that Barbie succeeded at the box office because the filmmakers respected the core visual identity.
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling looked like Ken. Margot Robbie looked like Barbie.
They adapted the themes, but they didn't touch the iconography.
Exactly. The film leaned into the existing visual identity rather than replacing it.
Right.
So Delara's is pointing out that you cannot claim to be executing the Barbie playbook if you are actively altering the visual foundation that made the IP famous in the first place.
Right, because Brunson's production company explicitly focuses on diverse voices, which he claims only ever goes one way.
Yeah, that's his argument.
So the studio is trying to borrow the critical sheen of Barbie without following its actual visual rule. What else?
Well, Brunson herself provided quote for the announcement. She described the current state of Betty Boop as pleasantly niche.
Pleasantly niche. Yeah.
And she stated her goal is to tell a story that is refreshing, subversive.
Subversive. There is that word again.
Yes.
It feels like every time a legacy property is read that word front.
It is basically the fulcrum of this entire debate. We really have to look at how the studios define subversive versus how the commentator.
Let's break that down. Here's where it gets really in.
Okay.
Think about a beloved neighborhood restaurant that has served like a famous classic comfort food meatloaf for 50.
Sounds good.
People drive from miles away for this meatloaf. It's an institution.
Right.
Then a new avant-garde chef buys the place. They decide the old meatloaf is, pleasantly niche, and they want to do something subversive. So they serve a deconstructed vegan meatloaf foam.
Radical departure.
Right. Now, the food critics at the fancy culinary might write glowing 5-star reviews about how refreshing and temporary the foam is.
Sure, they love that stuff.
But the regular customers, the people who kept the lights on for 50 years, they show up, look at the foam, realize it's absolutely nothing like what they came for, and they walk out.
They're devastated.
The restaurant loses its core customer base. The critics loved the subversion, but the regular customers just wanted the meal they remember.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that perfectly encapsulates the disconnect.
Yeah.
When a creator like Quinta Brunson uses the word subversive, she likely means playfully challenging outdated tropes, or maybe modernizing the themes for a new generation.
A way to dust off the cobwebs.
Exactly. She views it as a creative tool to keep an old property relevant.
Okay.
But the source text views subversion entirely differently. Del Arrow sees subversion as an act of hostility.
Hostile.
Yeah. He notes that creators are now openly using the word as a badge of honor. But in his view, to subvert a character is to intentionally tear down what the original fans loved about.
Wow. So it's not about surprising the audience with a clever plot twist. It's about subverting their emotional connection.
Exactly. He views it not as a creative tool, but as a weapon used against legacy fans to tell them that their nostalgia is wrong, or outdated, or problematic.
And, to insulate themselves from that kind of fan backlash, the studio brought in a trump card for this announcement.
They did. They secured the blessing of Max Fleischer's grandson.
The descendant of the original creator. That's usually the ultimate shield against criticism.
It's a smart PR move. The text notes that the grandson stated Brunson embodies Betty's intelligence, humor, sassiness, and compassion.
But Del Arrows takes a sledgehammer to that endorsement, doesn't he?
He completely dismisses it. He argues that the grandson's approval is essentially meaningless because he's, quote, getting a paycheck out of this.
So he views it as a transactional PR move, not a genuine artistic endorsement.
Right.
It's a very cynical, though perhaps realistic, view of how Hollywood secures intellectual property rights.
Which brings us to the financial argument, and this is where the commentator's logic gets really tame. Both John Del Arrows and Matt Walsh argue that these types of reimagined films consistently underperform at the box office.
Right.
Del Arrows claims they underperform relative to their production investment because the core audience, the people who actually have the nostalgia, decides to stay home.
Right. The regular customers reject the vegan meatloaf.
Exactly. But Matt Walsh takes it a step further.
What does he say?
He argues that a race-swapped Betty Boop has no chance of success. But he claims that the studios actually know this.
Wait, run that by me.
He said they don't even care about making money anymore.
He's arguing that multi-billion-dollar publicly traded corporations who have a literal fiduciary duty to shareholders are intentionally making movies they know will lose money.
Yes. Walsh claims they make these films out of spite and pure resentment for the traditional audience, rather than a desire to make money.
That seems incredibly counterintuitive. I mean, do these commentators actually believe studio executives hate their audience more than they love money? How does that even work mechanically?
Well, it speaks to a deep underlying belief among these critics that Hollywood has been totally captured by an ideology that supersedes profit.
Okay.
They believe the executives are willing to write off massive financial losses just to score ideological points and demoralize a specific segment of the culture.
It's a radical claim. It suggests a complete breakdown of normal capitalist incentives in the entertainment.
It is a fascinating contradiction the source presents. But whether you agree with that assessment or not, it is the lens through which these commentators view every single casting announcement.
And according to the sources, there are a lot of casting announcements to view through this lens.
Oh, so many.
If Betty Boop was an isolated incident, we probably couldn't be talking about it today. It would just be a quirky footnote.
Right.
But the sources argue emphatically that this is part of a relentless, decade-long pattern.
Yes. Del Arrows traces this current era of casting back to roughly 2014. And he lists a rapid-fire catalog of established characters that have been reimagined to show the sheer scale of what he views as cultural erasure.
Let's walk through his list, because it's important to see how broad this is.
Let's do it. So he mentions Ariel in Disney's live-action The Little Mermaid.
Okay.
He points to characters in the recent remake of The Witches. He references Rachel Zegler starring as Snow White.
Okay, so that's the fairy tale folklore bucket.
Right. But he doesn't stop there. He moves into actual historical figures.
Oh, boy.
He brings up a Channel 5 television series that cast a black actress as the real historical English Queen Anne Boleyn.
Which is a very different type of controversy than a mermaid.
Entirely different. Then he reaches into modern literary theater, pointing out stage adaptations of Harry Potter that featured a black Hermione Granger and a black Severus Snape.
Wow.
And then he brings up rumors surrounding a highly anticipated project that really pushes the boundary of his argument into the realm of ancient mythology.
What project?
He talks about an adaptation of the Odyssey.
The Homer epic.
Yeah. He claims there are rumors of a black actress playing Helen of Troy.
Whoa.
A character whose entire mythological identity was built around being the Greek ideal of beauty. He mentions rumors of the actor Elliot Page playing the legendary warrior Achilles.
Okay.
And the rapper Travis Scott playing a bard.
Now, obviously, those are unconfirmed rumors.
Yes, very unconfirmed.
But he uses them to illustrate a point about normalization, doesn't he?
Exactly. He says, if you've been paying attention since 2014, you know the ride never ends.
Man, just imagine the sheer volume of media being produced, right? Based on the source, is there a tipping point where a reimagining stops being a fresh take, comes a...
Well, that's exactly what the sources are. By combining all these different categories, fairy tales, historical monarch, modern pop culture, ancient mythology, he's building a case that absolutely nothing is off limit.
That's indiscriminate.
Completely. Yeah. According to the source, the erasing of these visual histories is systematic.
Right. It's not just a creative choice for one specific story. It is the new default setting of the industry.
And that leads to a profound sense of exhaustion among the commentators. When a supposedly subversive tactic is applied systematically across an entire global industry for a decade, it's no longer subversive.
It's just the established.
Precisely. And Del Arroz argues that the media treats this casting strictly as progress, while automatically labeling anyone who objects as a bigot.
The legitimate desire for visual continuity has been completely pathologized by the press.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the casting, the horseshoe theory of cultural erasure, the studio's justification, and the sheer scale of... But where is this war actually fought? Right. We have to look at the mechanics of social media, the curation of audience, and the silencing of dissent as described in the text.
We are moving from the movie screen to the digital timeline.
Let's get into it. The text details a specific online that reveals exactly how information and debate are controlled in modern fandom.
It involves Matt Walsh and a massive social media account.
Right.
According to the source, when Matt Walsh posted that critical tweet regarding the Betty Boop casting, the one where he claimed it was done out of spite, it went viral.
Very.
And it caught the attention of an account on X, formerly Twitter, called Discussing Film.
Now, Discussing Film is a behemoth. Del Arroz notes they have 2.8 million followers. They are a primary hub for pop culture news online.
And their stated mission is fascinating in this context. They bill themselves as a home for healthy and liberating discussion on all things pop culture.
Liberating discussion. Keep that phrase in mind. So Matt Walsh offers a highly critical, controversial take on a major piece of pop culture. How does the Home for Liberating Discussion react? Do they debate him? Do they engage with the critique?
According to the text, they did the exact opposite. They turned off their comments and they blocked Matt Walsh entirely.
They completely shut down the avenue for interaction. Del Arroz highlights the immense irony, right?
Oh, yeah. An account literally named Discussing Film actively prevents discussion the moment the conversation turns critical of a modern Hollywood mandate.
Del Arroz states, blocking critics of a casting announcement is the extent of liberating discussion they offer.
It's a huge contradiction.
But it's not just about one viral tweet from Matt Walsh. Del Arroz reveals a much wider pattern of gate.
Yes, he points out that he, along with numerous other major right-wing influencer accounts, were blocked by Discussing Film a long time ago.
Wow.
He claims that Discussing Film deeply hates the right wing and that they only allow liberating discussion if you already agree with them.
Essentially alienating 50% of the country.
That's the argument.
By operating this way, they are basically creating a walled garden. They're curating a massive, million-strong audience where only one type of opinion is allowed to exist regarding film, and it's an information silo.
And this isn't just happening on text-based platforms like X. Delarose also points to algorithmic suppression on video platforms like YouTube.
Let's dig into that, because the mechanics of the algorithm shape everything.
He warned his viewers that YouTube actively curates their search results. He believes that because of his controversial, anti-establishment viewpoints, the platform is designed to hide his content. He tells his audience that they, quote, may never find another video of mine again if they just rely on the...
So you have massive gatekeeper accounts blocking you on one side and faceless algorithms suppressing you on the other. What is the response to that? How do these commentators survive in that ecosystem?
They build their own ecosystem. And this is where the monetization of digital alienation...
Okay, explain that.
Delarose uses this suppression as a call to act. He implores his audience to move to alternative platform where they cannot be shut down.
He heavily promotes his own Substack called Fandom Pulse and its associated...
He frames Fandom Pulse not just as a newsletter, but as a necessary parallel alternative to mainstream gates like discussing film.
Right, to build culture together.
Free from mainstream algorithmic suppression. And he's getting paid for it. He mentions having over 300 paid Patreon and Substack subscribers who are funding his independent journalism.
You know, there is a really fascinating meta layer here.
Oh, definitely. This raises an important question.
Yeah.
I mean, we started this deep dive analyzing a critique about the erasure of a cartoon character's visual identity.
Right. Betty Boop losing her historic look.
But by the end of the source material, the argument has seamlessly morphed into a complaint about the erasure of dissenting voices on social media platforms.
The cultural erasure transitions into digital erasure.
The anxiety is exactly the same. They are taking away our characters, and they are taking away our ability to complain about it.
And it highlights a really profound reality about modern fandom.
It is fractured into completely separate reality. The source illustrates a landscape where mainstream pop culture accounts and dissenting critics simply no longer interact.
There's no debate.
No exchange of ideas. They just block each other and retreat into their respective silos.
They build digital...
Yes. In one reality, curated by accounts like discussing film and trade magazines like Variety, a new Betty Boop is an uncomplicated celebration of progress, and anyone who disagrees is a bigot.
And in the parallel reality, curated by platforms like Fandom Pulse, this casting is part of an evil agenda designed to erase white culture, and the studios are acting out of pure spite.
And commentators like Delarose brilliantly use this dynamic. By highlighting his own digital alienation, the feeling of being blocked and suppressed by the mainstream, he successfully monetizes a highly loyal, independent audience.
The cultural battle itself becomes the product he is selling.
It is a self-sustaining loop of controversy, suppression, and independent monetization.
All right. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, and we've gotten really deep into the psychology of this cold battle.
We really have.
Let's pull it all together and seamlessly recap the journey today.
Sounds good. We started with the specific catalyst. Quinta Brunson's casting as the 1930s animation icon Betty Boop.
Right.
We examined how the trade press, specifically Variety, framed this as an uncomplicated celebration, effectively gaslighting legacy fans by entirely omitting any mention of the stark visual departure from the character's historical pale-skinned flapper identity.
From there, we unpacked the intense underlying accusations driving the back. We look at John Delarose's sweeping argument that this is a deliberate agenda to replace whiter. And we contrasted that with the essay X, which are exact opposite starting. That race swapping is actually a racial to black.
Because it implies diverse original stories aren't bankable without borrowing white legacy properties.
Exactly. And we explored the alleged hypocrisy and double standards using the Sydney Sweeney as Rosa Parks hypothetical.
We then analyzed the studio's defense mechanisms, the attempt to align the project with the massive success of Barbie and the desire to be subversive.
We explored how the sources view these choices not as creative risks, but as acts of ideological spite that intentionally alienate core audience, leading to inevitable box office fail.
We also cataloged the expanding roster of reimagined characters, from fairy tales to historical monarch to ancient mythology,
showing how these commentators view this not as a quirk, but as an exhausting, systematic formula.
And finally, we looked at the digital battlefield. We explored how massive gatekeeper accounts block dissenting voices, leading to a fractured fandom where commentators build independent, subscriber-funded fortresses like Fandom Pulse to escape algorithmic suppression.
It is a massive, multi-layered conflict over who gets to own the past and who has the power to dictate the future of our shared culture.
It really is.
And as we wrap up today, I want to bring us back to that idea we touched on at the very the ship of...
The question of continuity.
Right, because I want to leave you, the listener, with one final lingering question inspired.
Okay.
If a character's visual identity is deemed absolutely sacred by some, but entirely disposable by others, at what point does a heavily reimagined character cease to be that original character?
If everything but the name changes, are we still looking at the same ship?
Exact. And it makes you wonder about the studio's if the true goal is to be subvert, to be refreshing, and to elevate diverse voices in a way, would they be better off, both financially and culturally, simply giving these brilliant new contemporary creations their own,
letting them build their own powerful legacies from scratch,
rather than forcing them to wear the hand-me-down clothes of the past? Something to really think about the next time a casting announcement.
It's a question that cuts right to the heart of why we tell.
Thank you to our expert for guiding us through this incredibly dense, highly charged terrain.
It was a pleasure to unpack the mechanic.
And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your eyes open, look closely at how the narrative is being constructed around you, and above all, keep questioning the media you next time.